All right, welcome back to the Physique Blueprint podcast. I'm Chelsea Kidd, your host, and I am back with Coach Sean Van Horssen, who is a competition prep coach based in the Bozeman area. We did a full intro and got to know Coach Sean a little bit more on a past episode, so make sure that you hop back and learn all about him and his background. But today he's joining us again so we can take a deep dive into one of his specialties, which is getting athletes truly stage lean so that they can come in dialed. Hello, Sean.
How are you doing, Chelsea?
Doing great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk about this because one of the biggest things that we see athletes miss whenever they come in, especially when they're new, is that they miss their conditioning for their show, even though they may have worked very, very hard to get there.
Yep, absolutely. It's always my least favorite feedback from a judge is if there's conditioning issues, because that means that I didn't do my job right. So I think that it is very common, especially for first timers. But it is something that is avoidable if you take the time and the care and get yourself ready for a show properly. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to just give you credit on that comment, though. I mean, just knowing, having been a first time athlete, knowing a lot of people who are first time athletes, it's not always the coach. Compliance is incredibly hard whenever you're coming in to dial in for your show. I told myself before recording this, I'm going to make sure that I like remind myself that not every prep is like a nightmare. But it is really hard. I mean, people aren't used to
yeah,
being that hungry. You're not used to that much stress on your body. Sometimes the judging criteria can be a little bit iffy. So even even top coaches, miss the
right.
conditioning of their athletes on a regular basis. I was telling somebody the other day, like sometimes it's like okay, call me out on when I mess up the scoring on this, but it's like if Brett Favre were to like get 21 points instead of like 14 points in a game, sometimes like it just happens even with repeat athletes. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, it really depends on who shows up as well, because especially for bikini or fit model, if there's a lot of people who show up a little bit harder than what the category is calling for, they're probably going to err on the side of rewarding that anyway. And if
Hmm.
they're coming in a little bit, if the majority of people are a little bit softer, the person who is a little bit harder, maybe national ready, is going to get knocked at a regional show just for
Yep.
coming in too hard, standing next to the wrong people. So there is a lot that comes into play with conditioning, but as far as the NPC goes, anyway, there's a pretty good criteria for it. So should know what to aim for. Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And we'll get into the criteria a little bit for the different categories. And there's so much wiggle room and everything, but to just talk about like the most common reasons that people do miss their conditioning, can you go into that in just like a high level overview of why that happens so often?
Yeah. So there's so many variables in a prep, right? And if you're not tracking all of those variables, it's really hard to tell what may be causing the lack of conditioning. So I think a lot of the time is we are don't have enough muscle base as it is, especially for first time athletes. So you're when you do get flat, you're kind of I call it skinny flat, right? It's like skinny fat, but skinny flat, right? So there's extra skin, but there's really not much muscle. When we fill you back up, it's only going to be so much. And then I think the sodium in the water is a big factor. That's really easy to mess up in the last couple of weeks there if you don't know what you're doing there. And then obviously if we're not, if we're coming into a prep and in at an unrealistic amount of body fat to get down to what the good criteria is, that's a huge factor because there's only it's not magic. There's only so much that you can
Yeah.
do in a certain amount of time. So without stripping yourself of muscle and everything else. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of factors there for sure.
There are a lot of factors, and I think you probably said that in a really good ranking of the different things that come in for concerns. So we're going to go through like the process of what it takes to get stage lean, so that so that listeners have an expectation of what are the different levers that your coaches are pulling whenever they're peeling you down for a show. What can you expect both from like a physiological and a psychological standpoint? One of the main things that I do want to make sure we explain for expectations, and everyone's a little bit different, but most of us are going to lose from like top to bottom. So you might start seeing like your shoulders get more defined way, way, way before you start seeing those tie-ins that we're looking for on the back of the legs, which tends to be like one of the last places on the back of the legs and the glutes, especially for us ladies that we lose body fat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of athletes will get into some hard conversations. At least I will with my athletes as far as bikini athletes go. Is you're fighting against yourself because the judges aren't going to want you to be too lean up top, but they're also not going to want you to be soft on the bottom. Well, if we're already lean at the top and we don't have those tie-ins in, obviously we have to get a little leaner. Um, but we have to do it in a way that's not gonna make us super duper striated up top, and it might take adjusting our posing. That's where the little detail work of the sodium and the water comes in. But I think for the most part, it is you're going by the criteria and what's most important. And I think that in bikini, it is most important to have those tie-ins and those full round glutes as opposed to being a little bit too lean on top. But it's a
Yeah.
hard battle and a fine line to walk for sure. So
It is, and it goes back to your point about having enough muscularity because that is tough whenever you get that peeled down and then you're like, damn, we still don't have tie-ins. You got to keep going, keep going, keep going. I'm
yep.
always so impressed. There are some women who have some like shadow of a tie-in even in their off season. I mean, that's great glute development, but it's also can be just how their body fat is distributed. And so anybody who doesn't know, I'm not sure if we said this at the top, but your tie-ins are where your glutes like taper down and connect into your hamstring. So if you look at the bikini division for NPC, it's pretty standard, especially once you start getting to like winning those local shows and getting into the national level. You're going to want to see that coming out, like actually pushing out against the skin a little bit. And Sean, correct me if I misspeak on any of this, but you don't want to go so far that it's like striated or like grainy looking. That would be something you'd see in like a more well-developed division like wellness or figure.
Right. Yeah. And it really is like it's an ever evolving sport, but right now they're kind of looking for bikini anyway. They're looking for fairly soft tie-ins, but they're not going to be as soft as fit model where they're almost not even concerned about the tie-ins.
Yeah.
But bikini is, yeah, it's very soft tie-ins. They don't want you too lean up top. They don't want you too lean on the bottom. Whereas wellness, they want to see your tie-ins pretty deep there, and they want to see full round glute development there. So it is playing the game by the book there. You're looking at whatever category you're going into, and you know how does the winner of the Olympia last year look, and how do we emulate that as best we can for whoever's body we're working with, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good recap of what to expect and just, why it is so hard to get there. So, whenever somebody comes to you, say that I'm coming to you and I've been in an off season or improvement season, I say, okay, I want you to get me on stage. I maybe have hopefully a couple shows, so I'm open to some different options for timelines. Where do you start with assessing me, assessing how much body fat I need to lose, what my timeline is going to look like for getting me on stage?
right. So for me, anyway, first and foremost, we kind of talk about a realistic timeline, regardless of where you're at. So before I even see pictures and where people are at, I generally ask if they've had stage experience, if they, because that kind of lets me know, okay, they know what they're in for. If they haven't had stage
Yeah.
experience, it's kind of a non-negotiable. I need at a very minimum 16 weeks, 20 weeks is preferred. If you have had stage experience, then we go to the next step, which would be let's see what you look like in your poses, what category, and then also just relaxed. So front, back, both sides. See what you look like. Where do you hold your fat, and how much fat do we currently have? Is a huge question for me. Um, and with that, I can kind of realistically give you, all right, if we have a 20-week prep, about 8 of those weeks we're going to be in a maintenance and a slow cut phase, and then the next 12 weeks we're going to adjust based on where we're at after that. So because no,
Yeah.
as no two preps are the same, even for the same person. There's different variables at point or at play wherever you go. So you kind of have to take it week by week, but I would say reasonably, depending on what category you're in, you should at least be able to see some muscular definition, no matter where we're going.
Yeah.
As we move up the hierarchy of wellness, figure, physique, you should be pretty muscular or pretty lean, depending on where you're at in the year. So
I like that. I think that's really realistic. And the 20 weeks is a good timeline for people to kind of wrap their heads around. I think that sounds a
yeah,
lot longer than people would maybe imagine. But I love how you said you're kind of like easing into it and then you kind of see where you're at and start really hammering. And part of that
right.
is just to manage the amount of stress that you're putting on the person's body too, right?
Yeah, because you don't necessarily. I'm under the impression that you don't want people to suffer longer than they need to, right? And
Yeah.
there is a point, like all preps, there's a point where it's like, okay, this is gonna suck for a bit, um, but you're gonna make it through, sort of deal. I try to make that as short of an amount of time as I can within reason. Obviously, we try to get ahead. Trying to get ahead, being stage ready a couple weeks early is a huge benefit. So that's always my goal. But making sure we have that wiggle room and are listening to the athlete as far as where are they mentally? Do they need a diet break? Is their body responding the way that we're expecting it to? So taking all those factors into play and 20 weeks gives you ample time for if something does happen, we can address it and we can fix the issue or move forward from there. And there are some times where I've had hard conversations with athletes around that 8 week mark or that 6 week mark where it's like, hey, we might not be ready unless something
Yeah.
changes here. But usually, so far, I should say, I haven't had any issues getting people to stage there. It's kind of like a kick it in gear moment, right? It's like
Yeah.
we can't screw around anymore. We're either gonna do this or we're not. So
Everything's got to be dialed. So,
yeah,
and I'll just share for kind of give people like a point of reference. So, in an improvement season or a very long off season, at 5'6", I sit around like 145 pounds. My stage weight is closer to like the 120s. Hopefully, would be a little bit higher than last time I competed. So, even I feel like I'm for my lifestyle and everything that I'm a relatively like lean person from a day to day, but that is still 20 plus pounds that I need to lose in 20 weeks. And that's a lot. I mean, that is a lot to lose. It is very hard to do. That's a lot of changes. Especially when you think like you have to preserve as much muscle as you can. So we have to do this right. Just to give people like the idea, sometimes if you go to a coach and they say, hey, maybe a recomp phase is best first, just to get you to a better starting point, definitely not a bad idea, not something to take offense to. But it's everyone's unique journey. Some people just want to get on stage for the experience to do it, which has been me in the past too. So just kind of giving people that point of reference of like what lean on a day-to-day basis looks like versus or leanish on a day-to-day basis looks like versus like stage lean and what it takes to get there. That rate can just be very significant.
yeah, it's a bigger difference than people think. I feel like you could be like you are pretty lean for just dated, like
Day to
compared to a
day.
normal person. I would consider you leaner than most, right? um but if you were to get up on stage right now, would you look like you were supposed to be there? Probably not,
Nope.
right? So that's where people kind of like, there are people who are naturally lean and walk around really lean and they're in great shape, and that's awesome. Good for them. It's going to make it easier when they do want to make that jump to the stage, if that's what their goals are. But then there's people like I lose like 40 pounds over a prep pretty
Wow.
reasonably,
Wow.
just because I have a tough time gaining weight. So when I bulk, um, I try to put on as much weight as I can because I have a tough time keeping it on. So uh,
Wow.
I'm eating a ton, but then when I'm cutting down, it's easy for me to lose that first 20 pounds or so comes off like just quick. And then the next 20 is where it's where the work begins. So
Yeah. Yeah. So everyone's very different. All right.
yeah.
Well, let's get into one of the general things I think people need to just kind of wrap their head around for the gravity of what you're getting into with a prep. And At least my philosophy on it is going to be that maybe deloads are a thing, maybe diet breaks are a thing, refeeds, not to be confused with cheat meals. We'll go into what those are, but there's no free meals on prep. You are hitting all of your training, like come hell or high water, pretty much. You really have to cover all of your lifestyle variables in terms of like sleep, your NEAT, just making sure that you're actually managing your stress because that's going to slow down your rate of fat loss if you can't keep your stress under control. So just to give people kind of that idea of like what you're getting into. And Sean, do you usually end up being able to give people refeeds and diet breaks and things like that?
Depends. It's different for every person. I try the way that I like to structure my prep is I make it is that easing people into it. So about 12 weeks out is the last that I promise a refeed. I'll be like, all right, we may not get one and anymore, right? That first 8 weeks, if we're dieting hard, if somebody's a little behind, in my mind of where they should be, then they might get a refeed every couple of weeks or so. Um, I have had preps where people are just plowing through carbs, right? I had a guy once, his maintenance calories were 32, 3,300. So we were eating probably around 3,000 and his NEAT went up. He changed jobs and
Ah,
he ended up eating. I had to have him eat above maintenance for the last 4 weeks into the show, what we thought was maintenance anyway, just to stay full because he was too flat. So that does happen from time to time where people
wow.
are just processing carbs like crazy. But more realistically and more traditionally in a prep, I try to stay away from a refeed unless we are chronically flat and our weight has kind of stalled. If we know we're in a deficit and our weight is stalled, it's a good sign for me to be like, hey, let's give you a big meal here, see what happens. Usually your
Yep.
weight drops after that meal.
Yeah.
The other reason I will do it, and it's only truly if I think that the athlete needs it, because there is, you get your fair share of whiny people or people who haven't experienced a prep before. If you truly do need a mental break, I do think a refeed is a good solution for that because it lets you know
Yeah.
like this is temporary. You're doing this to yourself, and it kind of gives you a reset as far as your hunger goes and your ghrelin levels and that sort of stuff. Kind of let
Hmm.
you know that, yeah, that it's gonna be okay, and that I am listening to you as a coach, and I hear you, and I know that you need it. Sometimes that's all it takes for that mental break, and it brings the stress right back down to nothing, hopefully. So
Yeah, yeah, or at least like a little bit of a reset. And there is, it can be really tough too. Like if you've been on prep for a long time, at least for me personally, like those refeeds can be a little bit triggering. Like
yeah,
I kind of like got like off track and it's hard to like I can tell I'm like mentally like more tempted to be
right,
off track and stuff like that. So there, just knowing the athlete, knowing yourself as an athlete, you may even want to ask your coach for a very prescriptive refeed. That works better for me
right,
personally than just saying like go have fun. Like being told go get 50 grams more of carbs or whatever,
right,
20 grams more fat, whatever it is that they want me to go have. Like that helps me a lot more because I just like once I get dialed, I want to stay dialed, and I
right.
just know myself that I don't do well with. And you have to think about it too. Like say that you go and like have chocolate cake or something, there really is an impact on your dopamine levels because you just had something that is just so rich
Yeah,
for your
rich.
body. Yeah, yeah. So that's a big factor. And I do want to just take a small step back. Do you like to prep people on meal plans or macros?
I'm a big fan of the meal plans, and the reason being, and I've done macros before. It's just I like to have as much control as possible as far
Yeah.
as inflammatory factors, right? And then sodium as well. So I have a lot of my athletes track their sodium in water from 8 weeks to show day, just so we
Hmm.
have a steady amount. And if we do need to manipulate that, then I'm not just guessing.
Yeah.
With macros, if you're not tracking your sodium, most people are tracking their water, but with macros, if you're not tracking your sodium, you can get in some sticky situations towards the end of things. What I know a lot of people like is like the first half of the prep doing macros, and then when we need to dial things in, we can dial it in that last 8, 6 weeks, whatever it may be, and we get on a plan then. I'm happy to do that too, but I know for my athletes who have made the most growth and perform the best, it's usually meal plan athletes. So
Oh, that's interesting. And that's cool that
yeah,
you've been able to see that difference. I think that both can really have their benefits.
I
If
do
you
too.
are on macros, you should probably have some kind of meal plan to default back to just for food sources, because that's another error that a lot of people make whenever they're trying to lose fat for a prep, is just getting so many not great food sources like
Yeah,
artificial sugars and things like that that can cause more inflammation and not help with satiety as much, and just not be like a good fuel source from a nutrient standpoint. So another, good thing whenever you're really trying to lose a massive amount of body fat, but keep your body nourished at the same time, is like dialing in those food sources with a meal plan.
yeah. And the other nice thing about macros is the diet fatigue isn't as immediate, right? A lot of the people who are on the macros they'll eat the same thing every day anyways. It's kind of
Yep.
just like a little bit they have the freedom in their mind, like, oh, if I want to change this, I can. And that's
Hmm.
generally how my meal plans are too. It's almost like macros as far as like if you want to have a different source of red meat than beef, like if you have elk or if you have bison, I'm happy to sub those in. Or the same thing with like white fish. You can sub
Hmm.
whatever kind of fish you want. Just let me know. It's kind of one of those things. And then carb sources, same thing. If you're getting sick of rice, well, we can do potatoes, sweet potatoes, whatever the athlete wants. It is just like you were saying, those food sources is what I'm most concerned with as a coach, to make sure that we're getting the correct nutrients. We're not having digestive issues, and we're keeping our inflammation down as best as possible. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that approach. So obviously we're putting people in a caloric deficit to help drive this fat loss. The next aspect I want to talk about is getting into movement overall. You made a really good point that you had an athlete that switched jobs, and even just getting
yeah,
that, increased non-exercise activity thermogenesis or just more steps per day can skew everything.
yeah, it's definitely something. If people aren't tracking their steps, I don't necessarily require it, but I do appreciate when people do, because it kind of sets me up as a coach for success. Because I'm like, okay, if we're this height, this weight, and we're taking this many steps a day, this is our base level of calories that I need to work off of. And then you take into account the cardio and the workout and that sort of stuff that you're going to put them through. It just makes the initial setup of the diet a lot better. And then we can play with that as well. We can play with the steps. We can be like, hey, if you're getting, if you don't want to do an additional X amount of cardio, we can do an additional X amount of steps instead.
Yeah.
I think it's again, it's another thing that's helpful mentally. If you're just throwing cardio at someone over and over and over again, it gets old, and it's always a frustrating thing as an athlete to be like, oh, another 15 minutes every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know some people prefer like, hey, just get another 1,500 steps or another 2,000 steps. Like that. That's a
Yep.
lot easier for people to hear than, hey, go step on the stair mill for another 20 minutes every day on top of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
road. I think it's super helpful from the sense of doing the giant equation that is calories in, calories out, for everybody's body. So I appreciate knowing as much data points as possible so I can factor those in when I'm setting stuff up as far as a blueprint goes. So
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think NEAT is so powerful for just that overall movement and just that low inflammatory impact on the body. Anytime that I'm putting somebody through like a metabolic phase, or now we're running like the mock prep, everyone's recording their steps, their wearables are synced in the app. I'm setting targets for them that are progressing. And you do have to kind of choose, okay, like obviously steps are not as time efficient as just getting some like low intensity, steady state cardio, like slow jogging, elliptical, something, or stair climb or something like that. So it might not work as well for their schedule. So that's something to consider. But I mean, personally for me, like I would rather be up super, super early to just go for a really long, like brisk walk to get as many steps as I can in the day and have a crazy amount of steps each day than spend any more time at the gym than I have to on a prep because you're already so, so entrenched at that point. And yeah, yeah, and it's hard. So I love NEAT. I love steps for managing that driving that weight loss or driving that fat loss. Where do you stand with prescribing HIIT versus so high intensity interval training versus low intensity steady state training lists for your athletes?
I'm open to both, to be honest. I think there's a time and place for both. So if we are already at a point in prep where we're doing, let's say 45 minutes on the stair mill 5 times a week, and we need to add another way to burn calories, we already have your diet at a point where you're struggling with hunger. We don't want to lower that. Um, it might be a place where I'll be like, all right, let's do a 10-minute little HIIT circuit at the end of your workout. That does a couple things. One, it's a new fun thing for your workout, right? It's new, it's exciting. But it also breaks up the monotony of the list, because that is the one issue with the list. Is it is a lot of just, you're in the slog, you're walking, you're finding something to keep you entertained. I know when I was doing it, I would watch Netflix while I was doing my cardio,
Yeah.
right? Or people read a lot, audiobooks, podcasts. There you go, listen to us.
Yeah.
But with HIIT, it is a little bit more engaging. I think it is very effective, especially for female athletes. I find it a little bit better for the overall physique. It sculpts a little bit differently than
Nice.
doing the list, because you are technically working power a lot of the time. You're still getting muscular development off of that HIIT. So
That's cool. That's really interesting. So for the last preps that I've done, there was no HIIT in there, and I had a hard time even getting my heart rate up where it needed to be for lists because I was
yeah,
dragging so hard at the end. But I think some people are just naturally a little bit better at it, and like they're wired a little bit better for it too. And those will be the people that coming to you, like you'll know that before you start because you'll
yeah,
have their history and everything. Is there's some people that come to me and they're doing a ton of HIIT. I'm like pulling them down on it. We need to do
yeah.
less of this for inflammation purposes. But some people just really prefer it, so it makes sense to keep it in. And I've seen athletes prep very successfully on it. And I will say, especially, and this is just anecdotally, I've seen younger athletes prep really well on it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I could tend to agree, and there might be something to that outside of anecdotes. It could just be the muscles are more primed to grow in that way, or to respond in that way. Um,
Yeah,
I know I find a lot with my younger athletes that it's harder to get them lean with the low impact, a lot of the time, and this could be true, could not be. I'm not gonna say that this is the gospel here, but I think it is a part of just not having been that lean before. You have that fat that's kind of like inner wound within that muscle. That fat's kind of hard to get out, unless you're
yeah.
really pushing. And I think that HIIT really gets you to that point where you're working those muscles so hard that you need to make the density a little bit better. It's kind of the power and the strength thing. I think that there is a huge aspect to training in all different modalities to kind of get the best physique possible. So
Yeah, and it is really reading how the athlete's responding. That's why we check in so much with so many different variables. And just to layer on to what you're saying, I think I like HIIT for younger athletes because I do think they recover better from it. But I
yeah,
like your point too. And then I like lists for older athletes like myself included that like over 35 groups. I think that our recovery just, hormonally, we don't recover quite as well as we used to. And then we may have more muscle density as is because we are more like seasoned athletes, maybe, all very dependent.
yeah,
And then the other point of that is that, at 35, like we're not everybody, but like some of us are pumping ourselves full of filler anyways, because we're losing subcutaneous fat. So we may have like an easier time getting leaner. Like the 35, those women athletes in that age group look fantastic sometimes because we just have like a little bit less subcutaneous fat. So our muscles show really, really well.
yeah. I agree 100%. And especially with all the new things out there now with the peptides. I mean, I feel like it is trending towards that 30 to 40 demographic very well as far as fat loss peptides go, especially
Oh,
in the sport
interesting.
of bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that it does allow you to do that list with more effect, but it also you're not holding as much subcutaneous fat at at all, if you're
Yeah.
doing it. So yeah.
Yeah. Very, very athlete dependent. And that is why it's so common to have a coach. Like, I think it's really, we actually just talked to Eva actually on the
Yeah.
podcast.
So yep.
So much fun. Great conversation. She self-coached, did a really fantastic job. But that's
Soccer
definitely not,
so yeah,
yeah,
great.
she's
So
so great. But that's not the standard. Like you've usually got a Sean who's looking over everything from week to week and just taking in all of these different elements that we're talking about and saying like, okay, this is the best way to put these into the equation. That is you to get you on stage to look your best. So it is a lot of different variables.
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
We haven't talked resistance training yet. My take on resistance training is that really it's got to stay in place for prep, but it's not, this is not the time that we're growing. This is not like the time that that's your main thing, is resistance training or strength training.
Yeah. So yeah, I could do a whole podcast on resistance training. It's a deep subject, and it is very subjective as to like what you're trying to do and what your results are. I think particularly for being in a prep, I prefer to stay on that middle range of reps. I'm not pushing strength, I'm not pushing power, but I'm also not pushing endurance. I'm trying to get as much hypertrophy work in there as possible. I'm not expecting growth. If growth happens, great. And there are a lot of first time athletes, I feel like, do make a lot of growth in their
You're
prep.
right.
And
Yeah.
it's because they haven't trained this way before and their body's responding
Yeah.
to a new training stimulus. But I think for veteran athletes and athletes who have done a show before, I think the majority of their resistance training and their strength work is done in the off season.
For
And the
sure.
prep is, I call it touching the muscle, right? So you're touching these points to kind of chisel down and fine tune how things are going to look when we're up there. I am a very firm believer in the kinds of exercises that you do in a prep are going to enhance the body part that you're doing it to when you make it to the stage, and that comes down even to the cardio. If you're doing more stair steppers, your glutes might come in a little bit more solid than they would if you were doing, let's say, the majority of your cardio was on a bike, right?
Yeah.
And then switching it up is huge too. Let's say you already have overdeveloped quads. Well, there's no need to drive more blood into those quads by doing cardio in a quad heavy sense. If we want to
Hmm.
build bigger glutes, why don't we cater our cardio towards that as well?
Yeah.
Same thing with resistance training. Like where do we want the nutrients to go? Where do we want the blood to flow to in order to make the best results? Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's when you're really in that zone and you're giving so much to this. I mean, I'm quad dominant, so you'll see me like on a stair climber angled in like the
Yeah.
best way to not touch my quads at all. You
Yeah.
know, 'cause it's like I don't want anything else growing on my quads. It's all needs to go to my glutes. So I love that you said that. And I'm really glad that you did make the point because I just said that you're not growing in a prep, but you're right. Like some people for sure do put on mass, especially new athletes in a prep.
Yeah, and I think it is important to say too, like you can grow in a prep, and especially in those smaller muscles that maybe I call them your stabilizers, right? They're going to
Hmm.
be able to grow like a glute med. If you need to round out your glutes and you're already starting a prep, you can do that. It's just not going to be as effective as if we had more calories going into your body, um, and targeting it at the same time, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, for all things fat loss, let's talk about getting into stalling, like just getting into plateaus and how we break past those.
Yes, we kind of touched on that a little bit. I think a refeed is a great strategy there, and it is different than a cheat meal as far as I'm concerned. A refeed is pretty clean food. There may be guidelines on it, like you touched on. I like to send my athletes to be like, all right, you're going to a steakhouse or a sushi restaurant and you're getting
Yeah.
whatever you want on the entrees, no cheese, no dairy.
Yeah.
It's kind of my rules for my athletes on a refeed anyway. Most of them opt for sushi, and then yeah, no fried stuff on the sushi rolls. All the fun stuff's out the window. But that just
But it's
helps
still
control
really
it.
good when you're on prep.
Yeah, it's still it's a great break, and you get the restaurant experience. The amount of Diet Coke
Hmm.
consumed is something that I can look past for a little bit. That's okay. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that the other thing with stalling, as far as weight goes, I think it's really important to consider all the factors that might be causing that. What's our effort level? Is our effort level standard throughout our workouts and our cardio? If you're tracking your heart rate with cardio, which is something I recommend most people do, um, how has that dipped? Has it been going down as you're doing your cardio, or has it been staying the same? If it's going down, then obviously it's an effort thing. You're getting in better shape. You have to put more effort. I know it sucks, but that's just the rules of losing weight there.
Yeah.
Um, and then effort in the gym, I find that is something that wanes as you get deeper in prep. Your calories are down. You're doing the same workout over and over again. You got it down like the back of your hand. Just making sure that you're intentional with your movements there. And then as far as pulling someone out of a stall, I think it's important to do either a refeed or maybe you change up their diet style. A lot of the times I'll do high day, low day, just
Yeah.
break up the monotony of that and allow for a little bit of extra calories without the bloating that comes with a refeed. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, lots of different strategies to explore there, and it really comes down to what may be the cause of the stall. It could be stress, could be sleep, could a lot of factors. So
Yeah, sleep is a big one. I always go back to sleep, and I guess that's a bit of a personal projection because I'm not a great sleeper, and it's something I've worked really hard on. But I mean, you'll see people all the time that will report like a refeed and a big drop, like you said earlier, like 2 pounds
yeah,
down after their refeed, or I actually got 8 hours of sleep last night, woke up 2 pounds drop, or it's not uncommon. So just those little factors are huge for breaking past those plateaus.
right. Yeah, it's huge, and stress is a big one too. That I think a lot of people don't know that they're stressed
Yeah.
when they are. So, like if you have a high stakes job and maybe you have something coming up that's a big deal, um, you may not feel stressed out, but your body can feel stressed out too. And then the other important factor on that too is prep can stress you out, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's important to reframe things in your mind, be like, okay, I'm doing this to myself. I always make sure my athletes have a full rest day. They don't do any
Okay.
cardio, any lifting, nothing. I often encourage them to try to take as little steps as possible. Just exist, do something you enjoy, because that's going to help in that stress factor more than you think. So
Right, right. Yeah. And this sport, I swear tends to, I mean, any extreme sport is going to attract people who like maybe their baseline is like a little bit higher than they realize for stress because I mean, they're someone that's coming into this and is willing to like monitor all their food and do all the workouts and all that. So it says a lot about the person to begin with. So I love that you check on that. And then I also think, it's a great time for the athlete to be honest with themselves in terms of adherence. It is, especially if it's the first time prepping, it is very common for people to fall off plan, to maybe have like some binge episodes, things like that. If it's happening, I do think you should tell your coach all of that. Um,
correct.
there's a ton of resources for it. There's a ton of ways you can help. And really, it's just this is going to be a miserable process for you and your coach if you are not like accurately reporting and they're going in blind and now they don't know what the hell is going on. So adherence and just owning anything that is off plan is so important.
Yeah, that's a big conversation I have at the beginning of prepping someone is communication and honesty is the most important thing between us as athlete coach. Just because if you're not communicating with me, I don't know what's going on first and foremost. And if you're not being honest with me, I can't fix any issues that come up because I don't know about them.
Yeah.
And there has been I've been pretty lucky. The majority of my athletes, if they mess up, they let me know right away. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad you told me. No problem. Let's get to the root of the issue. What caused this? Why did you feel like you needed to go eat 2,000 calories worth of trail mix or
Yeah.
whatever it may be, and here's what we got to do to fix that based on the timeline we have until our show, right? So
Yep.
but then I've had athletes take PEDs and tell me they're completely natural, and that'll screw you up, right? Because it's my strategy for peak week is different compared to natural athlete and an
Yeah.
advanced athlete. So you get the majority of good ones, but every now and then you'll have something that's like, why didn't you just let me know? Because then we can make you look better than
Yeah.
you look otherwise. So because I don't care
Or
either.
even your everything would be different going into the prep if
Well,
they were,
it would have been more food, probably would have been,
yeah,
yeah,
coming.
yeah, whole bunch of different strategies would have happened. Training would have been different. It just a lot of different stuff, but that was his choice to not tell us, and
Yeah.
he lives with it. So
Yep. Yeah. It is interesting like how much stuff comes up, and it is just that transparency with your coach is everything. I mean, your success is your coach's success. So even, I'm sure that, and especially as women, like I've worked with male coaches and female coaches, but you're telling them your bowel movements because
yeah,
that can be a factor for like water retention and just like, foods. It's just something they need to know. You're telling them like everything that's going on with your period. I like it's a very open conversation, and it that level of transparency really needs to be there. I do think, to be a good athlete, it's very good of you to keep it concise and try not to put in all the like fluff and stuff like that. I
yeah,
know I can be really like wordy sometimes, and I look back and I'm like, man, like I really put them through it, like just being so wordy on everything. But there is a lot of information that you do need to relay to your coach, and your coach really does want to know.
yeah. I think especially for women, I think it is important. The period piece is huge. It is. I'm sure it's different having a male coach because you're just like they don't care about that. We do. It makes a difference. It can explain a lot of like why the weight might have stayed the same or why we're looking a little watery that week. It can explain a lot of things. Maybe you're looking even drier. Sometimes that happens. But um,
Yeah.
the digestion thing is also like it's something that I have kind of been blessed with growing up in a family of medical people. Both my brothers in the medical field. My mom was in the medical field. So digestion was like a daily topic at our house. Like, oh, you're constipated. It's just like that doesn't phase me at all. So I appreciate when my athlete, if they're reluctant in telling me about that sort of stuff, it's more of like I honestly don't care. You could tell me anything about what your poop looks like, and I'll just tell you if that's good or not. It's not
Yep.
a it's not an embarrassing thing. As the old children's book goes, everybody poops, right? So
Yep, we'll
there you go.
break out a Bristol stool chart to help you if there's any
Exactly.
concerns. But uh, so just know that there's so many different conversations like that you're having, and things that could be triggering that stall. So like the more stones that you're turning over, the more information that your coach has to work with. I think that's really important. So kind of recapping on some of the tools that we talked about. We talked about the diet aspect, the caloric deficit, your approach to that, which I really like. I also really like, what you said about kind of coasting in and then hammering at the end. I think that's a really solid approach too. I like that you get people ready a couple weeks early, which makes so much sense. And there's some coaches that will go for like 4 to 6 weeks early, which I think is way too much because that's too long to hold that leanness for most
Right.
people. So going back to the levers, we talked about steps. So like your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, your cardio training, diet breaks, undulating approaches for your diet, bringing up food, bringing down food. Of course, we're going to do a whole episode on PEDs. So I'm going to try to like stay off of that for now. But of course, that's another mechanism that can be
Exactly.
thrown in.
Yep.
Is there anything else that I missed in terms of just like the actual levers that we're pulling to make this equation and get the person stage ready before we go into some of the realities of this fat loss phase?
I think the only one that I'd say is, and it's not required. It's just something if you know it and you're tracking it, water and sodium. it is
Yeah.
something that can be manipulated. I've done preps with athletes where we have manipulated them, they looked great, and I've done preps where we haven't and they look great. I think the important part is going in with a strategy around it, as opposed to just randomly like, oh, let's cut your sodium in half and double your water. Like I think you have to, as a coach, I think it's important to know what you're doing in that sense. And as an athlete, if you haven't truly been tracking your sodium or your water, I think it's best to just leave things as they are, and let your coach kind of, if they've been tracking it and it's something you guys have talked about, then they might want to do something with it. But it's not, like I
Hmm.
said, something that you don't always have to pull that lever. It's there if you need it, but it's way less important than the diet and the exercise and the stress and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing what can happen in peak week. And I think the strategy is really key. But at the end of the day, like with that last week, if your conditioning's off, your conditioning's
Yeah.
off, it's not actual magic. It's not going to
Right.
make you like drop. And I say like 5 pounds, like that's nothing, but 5 pounds on stage is really big.
Right.
That's a big difference. So, at the time, and I do want to say like the timeline is just really important. So going to a coach for like an assessment, talking to a Sean and giving him like the most information that you can about, where you are and really like what your goal is. Are you just trying to do this to get on stage and yay, I'll lose some weight in the process? Or are you trying to go for a pro card run? Because that's going to make a big difference too in what
Yeah.
this phase and what the prep and fat loss journey looks like for you.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think it is important to put everybody's prep in the context of what their goal is. If Yeah, if it is the sense where you want to see if you like the sport and you want to step on stage, you want to go through the thing, see if you can do it, um, and you're okay with not being quote unquote competitive, your prep's going to be it's going to be similar, but the importance of how lean you are at the end is not as dynamic as if you are going on a pro run and you're
Yeah.
doing like a show into a show. I think that's really important to think about too. But yeah, it all comes down to like overall, what is your goal? How do we best get you there? If you need to get the stage, obviously we want to make you look like you belong there. I never want to bring an athlete in who truly isn't ready to be on stage, even if that's their goal.
Yeah.
I would rather just suggest, hey, let's look for a show in 4 weeks from now, or
Yeah.
however long. But if it is a thing where you're like, hey, I need to get nationally qualified so I can go for my pro card in 4 or 5 months, or maybe it is in 2 weeks. It's like, okay, well, let's be honest about where we're at and what our timeline looks like at the very beginning there. And, how have your preps gone in the past? How long did it take you to get that lean? I think is a really important question to ask. And then, where are you at now compared to there? Usually, if someone's taking the sport seriously, they should be in a better place and they should have more muscle and a little bit more capacity to burn that fat easier. So, yeah.
Yeah, all really, really good background things that need to be taken into consideration. Just in case I get kicked out of this room at the top of the hour, I'm going to go through these next realities and ask you if you agree or disagree, so we can kind of like power through these. So, do you agree or disagree that going under 1,200 calories is sometimes a reality for a fat loss phase or prep?
I agree. Try to make it not a reality, but sometimes it happens. So,
Totally
yeah.
happens. And I mean, obviously you gotta consider petite women that are just like have a lower
Yeah.
intake.
Yeah.
But even like I always share my personal experience. Like I was way sub 1,200 calories for a long time. It was just what it took to get me lean. So it's like it does happen. I see
Yeah.
that come up sometimes as like demonizing coaches around it. And I mean, you asked to play an extreme sport. That's kind of like what goes with it. So
And like I said, you try to make people suffer as little as possible, but there is
yeah,
a point where sometimes you got to suffer. So,
for
gotta do it.
sure. And that leads right into 2 hours or more of cardio per week.
Per week. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a given, and for some people, for sure. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I like your reaction to that. Um, yeah, so look, I you can get to like 90 minutes a day. Like it's like you really
yeah,
have to even have bandwidth for prep, like just to be realistic, like just to get that much body fat off. We are not. your body does not want to be that lean. It takes throwing a lot at it. So like 90 minutes is not unheard of
Right.
for getting stage lean.
Yep, I try to keep most of my athletes under hour 15, 5 days a week. But there are, there's special cases. I was one of those athletes who had to do an hour and a half. So, yep.
Yeah. And I do think you mentioned the effort and heart rate as well. I think that's a big factor too. I had to do a ton of cardio, but also I was finding myself kind of just stalling out on my cardio to where I was like, okay, my heart rate is not getting as high as it can. My energy is here. I think if somebody held a gun to my head, I couldn't move any faster. And so it's like, and then yeah, the volume has to go up because my effort is not
Correct.
matching where it needs to be. So it's I don't want to say like sometimes it's the athlete's fault because like yeah, it feels like you're running in mud, like
Yeah.
you're trying so hard, but yeah, it's just that's just the reality of it. You've got to figure out like it's either going to be intensity or volume, so one of them's
Yeah.
got to give.
Yeah. Pick your poison.
Exactly. Loss of menstruation being a reality. We talked about this a little bit previously for like what you need to know when you're competition prepping. It is a reality for a lot of women going into competing.
Yeah, again, it's something that I try to avoid, but it happens, and not knowing everybody's full medical history is a huge thing too. Like I know women with PCOS have a tendency to lose their period easier than well, it has a tougher time coming back, I should say. It's not necessarily a loss easier, but
Mhm.
if you do lose it, it is tougher to come back. But again, it is something that I don't think any coach goes into a prep like, oh, this is the goal. I think everybody's trying to keep,
Yeah.
yeah, keep everybody as hormonally happy and healthy as possible. But unfortunately, especially in those tougher classes for leanness, like wellness and figure and physique, it's tough to keep a menses while you're that lean. So just how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the goal having your periods, that's something that they'll be tracking on their end also. And I do think we'll go into it more in another like PED episode, but I do want to state like there is a reality that people are using enhancements. I was at Girl Power down here in Florida the other day watching that show, and I was chatting with a lady in the audience, and there was people on stage, and she was like, "Do you think she's enhanced? Do you think she's enhanced?" About all these different athletes. And I'm like, man, like the NPC might not be the place for you if you're like super worried about that with every single athlete because you just very likely could be getting on stage next to people who are enhanced.
Correct.
It's not against the rules in this show unless you're doing a natural NPC show. So just know like that yes, PEDs are there. They give people an advantage. So, if that's something that's going to really bother you or you don't feel like is fair, then there are other avenues for that.
Yeah. Plenty of other options. OCB is growing, and honestly, in my opinion, I think they do a great job with their judging. NPC Natural is also growing pretty quickly. There's a lot more shows this year than I've ever seen as far as NPC
Cool.
Natural goes, which is really cool to see. It's not a requirement to do enhancements. I always make sure that that's known first and foremost, especially for gals. I think it is very reasonable to go pro as without enhancements. Your road there might be longer, and it may be harder, but you will be standing up at any regional show. I almost guarantee you there's at least two or three gals that are generally it's over 50% that are using something or another that's on the banned substance list that's ever growing. So
Yeah.
that's just the way it goes. I think it's fair to let everything in, but I also think it's fair for natural federations to be like, hey, nothing, right? So
Yeah. And athletes, we get to choose the lane that we want to go in. And yeah, nothing is impossible. So it's not to like rule anybody out for whichever avenue they want to do either. Another thing I do want to say, because I feel like I don't do a good job reflecting this sometimes, is that preps do not always have to suck. Um,
yeah, I
there are
agree. Yeah,
Yeah, there are really good ways, and you mentioned this at the top. One of the biggest ones is like coming into a prep or fat loss phase or whatever with enough muscle to begin with, so that you're not just like whittling down to
no,
reveal a very big lack of muscle.
right. I think if you want to be competitive as an athlete in this sport, essentially, is you need to have a base of muscle, regardless of how long you've been training. there are people, I say it's not fair, right? Life's not fair, but there are people who do not need to train very hard to build a lot of
Yeah.
muscle. They're just prone to they just hold a lot of muscle naturally. But then there's people who struggle with it. I think you need to find a point where you're like, okay, I feel good, I feel muscular, I feel strong. If now where do we go from here? If you want to lose weight, if you want to get on stage, I think that's important. But I think first and foremost, yeah, having a muscular base will set you up for success in more ways than you think. So
And definitely to be eating enough too. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
another big thing. Don't come in and be like, yeah, I've been eating 1,200 calories and doing a ton of cardio for the last, 3 years to maintain the level of leanness I'm at now. Like that is gonna like you just are gonna have to tack on to that to get leaner. But I think that does happen sometimes, because there's so many people who are like general population fitness enthusiasts that uh, really go hard on the cardio and really go light on the food, or and then may blow it out on the weekends and stuff like that. And that's like kind of how they maintain their balance and their bodies. So if you're in that boat, there's nothing wrong with that. This is a really great opportunity for you to get into more structured routine. But I would say do that more structured routine and get that down before you start dieting
yeah,
again.
yeah, for sure. And I think that speaks to a good point as far as um, the people who have a little bit more experience with that. Hey, the weekend is not a fun food time. It's everything's a little more structured. They do generally come in with a little bit more success, and then having um, that hunger level be high with a high amount of calories that you're going into prep. Like you're eating a lot, you're maintaining your weight, and your hunger's still up. I think that's
Yeah.
really a good place to like, oh, okay, I can afford to lose a little bit of calories and still be eating a ton of food. I think that's a really good indicator of like, okay, we're ready to lose some fat here if our
Yeah.
calories are already really high. So yeah,
Yeah. High food is a flex. Like, I mean, anyone who's sharing that they have, my macros are at blah, 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 blah. Everybody's physiology is super different. And we mentioned earlier, like PEDs can affect that and things like that. But like high food is a flex in this sport. Like being able to keep
yeah,
your food high, and like that's why people, in my opinion, that's why people share that. I mean, like, yeah, you probably earned that and like worked up to that
yeah.
over time. It's a very diligent effort. So definitely something that can make it a little bit more of a manageable process. I want to make sure I ask one question that came out of the mock prep challenge, but then I just want to go through some advice that came in from the group too. Are you okay for a few more minutes, Sean?
Oh yeah, I got time.
Perfect. Thank you. So they mentioned most first time competitors not having enough muscle, getting in and having that small, flat like look because of that. So we chatted about that. Tie-ins you mentioned, definitely a huge thing. They said prep is harder than expected was some of the feedback that came in for advice. Stage lean is very mentally and physically consuming. You're going to be very hungry, food obsessed, fatigued. That is just a big factor of it. I will say you feel fragile. That was something that was really unexpected for me when I prepped, is that I felt so fragile. And I was like living in Montana and trying to like dirt bike with my ex-husband. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm gonna fracture something. Like just like I just felt so frail. Oh, I hated it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
You have like no padding on you. And somebody said that shaving your armpits is a nightmare, which is so
it's
true.
true. Very true. Yeah.
Do you know this? Or
Well,
have you heard
yeah,
this?
I mean, guys have to shave their armpits too. Yeah, so
Oh, really?
when you get super duper lean, it there's a lot of concaves and holes. You gotta find the whole thing. My
It's
wife would help me. I was
it
fortunate, so
that is great. It's like painting the corner of a wall.
yeah,
Like it's like just like you can't like
yeah.
yeah, I thought that
The
was such a
razor
good
doesn't
one.
bend that way. It doesn't do that.
Yeah,
So
that was such a good one. I we talked about the loss of cycle, low libido is another thing that comes up in the group pretty often with people trying to navigate low libido, like as your, food, energy, hormones, like stuff coming offline, like yeah, your sex drive is gonna probably tank. So if you're in a relationship, that's a good thing to, disclose or have conversations around in advance, because that's a very big reality around getting deep into prep.
yep, absolutely.
We talked about the conditioning can kind of be a moving target. I feel like, and you make good points about this in the opening, Sean. But depending on where you're being judged, who you're being judged by, which level you're at, who shows up, it's good to just know that, like, yeah, that you focus on bringing your best that you can to stage and being really proud of what you put on stage because the conditioning can be a bit of a moving target.
Correct. Yeah, especially with Fit Model. I've just found if you look at I think it's 4 girls now who are qualified for the Olympia this year. If you look at them, they're all very different builds and very different conditioning. So it is like, all right, what are we looking for? I don't think they quite have the criteria set yet, which is interesting. So
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see how they do dial it in.
yeah,
Let's see. I think a good coach is going to push you without like absolutely wrecking your health. That's really important. I mean, talk to your coach, make sure you know that you're comfortable with their approach moving in. And oh, some of the upsides. I love these. So I love that there is so much, and even I talked about this, that really transcends this sport. Like, especially if you do it over a long period of time to where you are like dialed in and you've got these habits, whether you're getting ready for the stage or you're just trying to improve, for the unknown timeline and going back to stage or just for yourself. There is just something that can like transcend the sport in terms of just the confidence it gives you to see yourself be able to accomplish something that is this hard to do. It can actually, that we'll talk about reverse dieting and everything there, but it can actually give you a better relationship with food because you recognize just how much it impacts you for fuel. So that's huge too. And then just like having self-awareness and discipline. I mean, even being able to strike a pose on stage that translates to pictures, that's always nice for day to day. So there's a lot of things that really can translate just to make it a really, really amazing experience for people.
yeah, I think the confidence is huge. I think the relationship with food, if done correctly, is yeah very beneficial because you kind of understand why nutrients are important. And then yeah, I think there's more benefits than downfalls as far as longevity goes. Just because you learn a lot about yourself more than the everyday person walking down the street knows about themselves. You know so much more because you're like, hey, if I eat sweet potatoes, then I feel this way. If I eat chicken, I feel this way.
Yeah.
Right? You know what your body likes, and then you also have the confidence. You know what you can take mentally, because it is a hard sport. You have to put yourself through some tough times. So stick with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huge, huge for self-awareness. I completely agree with that. And I do think one of the biggest things going into a competition prep or a fat loss phase is going to be just not having like doing your best and not having an expectation on winning. And it sounds so cliche, but like focusing on the journey and what you can actually learn about yourself.
it's true. And I always tell people who have done preps before, maybe going into a different show, and they're generally aware of this, is it's you versus you. You can't
Yeah.
control who else shows up. So knowing that you did the best job that you possibly can do should be a win in general. If you stuck to your diet plan 100%, you did not miss a day of training, you did not miss a day of cardio. That's 20 weeks is 5 months essentially. So for
Yeah.
5 months of your life, you did not miss a beat. That's huge, and you should be proud of that. That's my view.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like you absolutely will be proud of that. I feel like that's always the biggest difference you see with people. It's like if you hit all of your variables, like how could you not walk away like proud of that? So
yeah, you
I,
did
I
literally
I love that.
everything you could. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so the question that came in from the mock prep challenge, if you don't mind fielding this, do you recommend stopping creatine during the prep or fat loss phase? If so, how far out from peak week?
I personally don't recommend it. I know some coaches take it out. If you're going to take it out, I don't think you need to take it out much more than a week prior, 2 weeks maybe. I think 10 days is like the actual half life. But I think creatine, all creatine is going to do is push more water intramuscular, right? So it's not going to necessarily make you hold extracellular water, which is what gives you that watery look, unless you're taking way too much creatine for your body to handle, or B, you're eating a lot of kind of junky foods that are going to have you holding water anyway. It's going to enhance that look. But if you're eating clean, you're sticking to a meal plan, I think if anything, the creatine is going to help. Plus, there's just so many benefits to creatine with all the studies on what it does mentally. Now it's just a huge help in a prep because it kind of helps you keep that focus, and it does keep your muscle bellies full. So I don't think you need to do it personally. Yeah.
Completely agree with that. I did a workplace wellness webinar, and the one of the last like doorknob questions for the RD that was presenting, Austin, was top supplements, and right off the top, creatine monohydrate. Like it's yeah, don't mess with it in your prep. Like don't pull it and not tell your coach or anything
Yeah.
fancy like that, or double your dose or whatever.
Yeah.
But like
Keep
you
it
said,
standard.
yeah, keep it all the same. Okay, for all things fat loss, and just making the magic happen over those 20 weeks, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or anything else I should have asked you?
I would just leave everybody with this. I think the most important thing that we might have, we talked about it without talking about it, is consistency. And just staying consistent with your plan, staying consistent with your food, listening to what needs to be done by your coach if you're self-coached. Being honest with yourself, but being consistent in everything you do, putting that effort forth every day, doing what needs to be done, and then getting your ducks in a row as far as sleep, stress, and everything that goes into a prep is concerned. So consistency is key and a huge factor in a successful prep. But outside of that, I think we touched everything. So
Yeah, awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciated all of your insights and expertise on this one. I really appreciate you hopping on. We'll make sure that Sean's application for coaching is in the show notes for all of these episodes, so you guys can reach out to him, because he is taking on competition prep clients. You have some spots on your roster now, right?
yeah, oh yeah, always taking people. Happy to help. Lifestyle competition, anything you need. I err towards competition just because I enjoy it a lot more. So.
Very fun. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Where else can people find you to connect with you?
Yeah, I think the best place to find me would be on Instagram at healthy as a Horsen, and on Facebook I'm in the bodybuilding group that Chelsea is a part of there, and under my name Sean Van Horsen. I think it's pretty easy to find me there.
Perfect. I'll make sure I put those in the show notes. Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you everybody for joining us.
All right, take care. Thank you, Chelsea.